Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Other Side of the Ropes, the video column about wrestling from a wrestler's point of view. And I'm none other than Red, aka Shaka, for those of you who don't know me by now, and you probably never ever will if you don't. Um, Now, last week I went into a rant coming from right off the heels of title defense and coming back from McCarran International in Vegas. Um, Something I had touched on. One of the things people really kind of miss, and it really gets my goat, and that's one of the reasons why it sets me off big time. Um, because people think that they might think, and I don't care if they do, it's my column, but still, like, okay, naturally I have my own obligations, and the Power Trip Wrestling Internet title, that's the biggest one I have at the moment. But reason why I bring those up is you got missing ingredients. One of the biggest, I think you can call it, complaints, grievances amongst the people in our community is things like, people talk about the way things change. And the sad thing about it is, um, whether we realize it or not, we're a lot more complacent than we give ourselves credit for. Um, I know I go off and rant about, like, when you get the pay-per-views and all that, and sometimes I've run the column right after the heels of like a WWE or a TNA pay-per-view. But one of the things I caught, like, and I go outside the box sometimes, because I mean, let's face it, um, a lot of things change whether we realize it or not, and a lot of us are like clinging hard to like the status quo or trying to be out of the name of nostalgia, going back to 25 years ago. Listen, wrestling history goes further than that. It's a lot more richer than what we grew up watching. Now, what some people would call old school, I don't call it old school. I call it what I grew up watching. You got to dig deeper than that. Seriously, you do. You have to dig deeper than just the last 2 decades or so. That was pretty much the beginning of the end. And people talk about the territories. Yeah, we saw that on television, but you got to realize one thing. When we saw it, we got lucky. We were about to see the NWA territories about to hit their death throes, whether we want to care to admit to it or not. I mean, and it wasn't just Vince. Vince just capitalized on what was going on. I mean, the promoters couldn't run anymore due to what was going on with the economics in the country. Reaganomics kicked everybody's ass. Wrestling was no exception. The promoters couldn't afford to run because the people couldn't afford to come to the shows. And Vince saw this and he was buying up. He was basically signing up all the top talented territories. And that's who wound up on the television, on the syndicated shows, like wildfire, like just like hotcakes, you know. And you try to build, but the guys were going kicking and screaming. They couldn't do it anymore. Um, but the other thing to that is, I mean, if you want to look at it this way, okay, TV was the lifeblood of professional wrestling, and that was true up until about maybe the last 2 decades ago. Reason being, what people don't seem to realize is television is not the same either. I mean, you had local networks. They're non-existent anymore. There's no such thing as a local network in most places. Like where I'm from, Philadelphia, we're in a big metropolitan area. There are no more local networks. I mean, Fox used to be what we call WTAF or WTXF. Fox bought that up. Okay, 17, that's the This Network. If you go out somewhere else, it's the This Network somewhere else too. CW, same thing. These aren't local anymore. So, I mean, if you get lucky enough to get a TV slot, guess what? You just coughed up enough money. If you got enough people to back you up sponsor-wise, you're only going to get a late-night slot, which would have taken the place of a paid program for, hair care or some other nonsense or something else, and the latest hustle for, like, for fitness or whatever, like the Insanity or CrossFit, something like that. Okay? You're probably better off just streaming your stuff online. You're better off than just worry about advertising. Nobody's figured that part out yet. Okay? Now, the other missing ingredient, because everybody's talking about the fourth wall. Stop it. Okay? All right, I get the fourth wall thing. Listen, That's a TV term too, and they've been knocking down the fourth wall ever since they had television. You know why? Because what else are you going to watch? They can knock it down and put it back up, and nobody else is the wiser. Now, I don't know about you, but my mother always told me, don't believe everything you see on television, and she's right. Okay? Now, us, wrestling, we became a guilty pleasure. We're supposed to be a sport. The missing ingredient there is, especially here in America, people made the mistake, and I'm talking about our people. People in our community made the mistake of doing one thing. We got so caught up on one thing that it messes up big time, and people are too scared to admit it. We got too obsessed with the showmanship aspect. And there's nothing wrong with being a showman. Okay? You see that when you see somebody hit a touchdown in the NFL, or you see that when you're watching a basketball game. I mean, showmanship's always going to be part of that. Otherwise, it's going to be boring as all get out. I mean, we're missing the sportsmanship, guys. Now, even when stuff we grew up watching, the dudes that broke in, most of those guys that made the cut, they got tried out. These guys were, why do you think these guys were former athletes? I mean, either on the collegiate circuit, the pro circuit, Olympians, didn't matter. Like, I mean, you get a guy like the late Dr. Death Steve Williams, they put him up in the obituaries because he played for Oklahoma University before he went into wrestling. They made light of that too, but he played for Barry Switzer before that, man. 4-time All-American for OU nose tackle. That was his claim to fame. A lot of guys that we saw, Dusty Rhodes, Terry Funk, Jack Mulligan, all of these guys, they played for West Texas University before it became West Texas A&M. So they already had, some athletic credibility. And that's what's missing. Okay, when people ask me about like Shaka, when are you going to do your next MMA fight? And I said, look, I don't know if I'm ever going to fight again, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to train. But at the same time, I'm trying to get into the grappler circuit. Why? Because that ties in to what it is I'm doing here in wrestling. That's what a lot of the guys should be doing, even if they don't compete, but get an idea. It's called a sport for a reason. That's why we're athletes. I mean, for real. It was supposed to be athletes. Act like it. I mean, little small stuff makes up for big things that kind of messes up. I mean, you talk about heavyweight, cruiserweight. Yo, listen, we disappeared so far up our own asses. Okay, I mean, it's about like 14 different weight classes. Say like in boxing, they cleaned it up a little bit for MMA, but it's pretty much the same. But they're still there. When's the last time anybody in wrestling ever reinforced a weight class? You can say heavyweight. I mean, get to the point now. I go to venues. They don't even announce hometowns. They don't announce weights. They just announce names and a title. What is that? That leaves no class. It leaves no prestige, and nobody's enforcing it. Okay. I mean, I caught the tail end of the press conference after the main event fight for this last UFC with John Jones and Quentin Jackson. I mean, they're on either side of the podium, but I mean, they were cordial as ever. I mean, they just beat the snot out of each other for 4 rounds, and they still making comments like, okay, John Jones is making a thing about Quentin's foot, and they joking about it, and then Quentin asked him about like, well, how was my wrestling? And John Jones said, honestly, yo, you stuffed me pretty good. Quentin comes up, well, that's what she said. Everybody got a chuckle out of that before John Jones said no comment. I mean, but like I said, they were professional about the whole thing. And at the same time, at the end of the day, they're still athletes and they're sportsmen. They showed exactly what they can bring to the table. And, there was no animosity. I mean, this whole dynamic you see here in wrestling, everybody doing the yelling. Why? This ain't 1986. I'm not after anybody's blood. So, I mean, even if I sit up there and beat the snot out of somebody, I'm like, look, it ain't nothing personal. I don't see the point to it. I mean, we're missing a whole lot of stuff here, people, for real. I mean, it's just something you guys to sit up there and really think about. Just really, really think about. Nobody's cracking a whip because most of the guys in there, they might have been marking time. Oh, I've been in X amount of years, but where did you go? You didn't really do any seasoning because nobody's doing it anymore because everybody stayed in the same spot to find out what it is they got for themselves. To find out what it is, I mean, nobody competed. That's why I switched over into another bit and came back. When I said I was going to compete in MMA, people thought I was leaving wrestling. Why? A lot of top tier guys in the MMA, they turn around, they'll go back, like, you know, a lot of ground guys, they'll go back in the Sambo and compete. They'll go back in the no-gi competition. They'll go back to Grappler's Quest. We got them in wrestling too. We got a couple of them over in Europe. One of the females, I'm gonna bring her up later on. Yenny Sheridan. She's from Scandinavia, and she crossed over. She actually went over to Grappler's Quest and got a silver medal last June over in New York. What's that tell you? Right now, she's the Catch Division champion for Pro Wrestling Eve. So I mean, you can't get any more legit than that. But like I said, my time's running short here because, yeah, it takes me a while to upload this. I'll be honest with you. So, I mean, like, I'm just going to start with the shout outs to my boy Jesse. I'm Jesse Johnny Logan, 38 Proof, to the MCW crew, EL Stanley, D-Line, Massive Mike, Chuck, down in Tennessee, Lady Amazon, Luscious Bob, Luscious Bob Gary, to Blade Walker, Scotty Bullwinkle, miss you guys, Ghetto Blaster wherever you are, to the Elite Generation Wrestling crew up in Tamaqua, Sean Fury, big ups to Grizzly Warrior, because I heard you got a little banged up, man. I hope you come out okay, man. Just hang tough, baby. To the 215 Empire, you guys know who you are, Kayfabe TV. The Junior White up in New York. To my little brother, Mr. NMG Sky Limit Wrestling Champion. That's right, we talking about the Prince Xavier Fate from the 212 Empire. Over in England, the Rough and Ready Jim, Vicky, Jim, PT player Peter Spanaforth, to Woo, to Drewy, to Teetotal Tommy Stevens. That's right, I'll put you over, to the Milkshake, to Greg Gunner, over to my boys over in Belgium, the Sumerian Death Squad, to Rico Bushido, to Mr. Destructo, to Uncle Vito, to my Deutschland crew, Craig BC, Monique, the two Susies in Dresden and Berlin, my daughter Silvana, to the Voice, Rick Valentine, to WrestlingJunkies.de and Björn and the crew, to the Wrestling Fever crew, to Bad Bones, to the DWA crew, Deutsche Wrestling Alliance, Crazy Johnny Tiger, to the Top Cats crew, Andrea Babic, to the Austrian crew, to the Kovaches, to Babby Killer, to Machine, to my boys out there. Who else am I missing? Oh yeah, Absolute Andy, to the Pro Wrestling Eve crew, to Yenny, Mina, Jazzy. You all know who you are. To the rest of y'all I missed, I try to get as much as I can, as I can possibly get away with off the top of my head. Grace to all of y'all. To Igliba and Famesa Dish. After that, man. Oh, I almost forgot. To the Belgian crew. Bull, Laurie, Beatings of Russ, Thorax, Jack Demento, Homeless, Dr. Gangrene, Wendy Alosri, Rob Raw, Enderdad. On that note, I'll see y'all in the next week, and stay tuned. Sunday, Top Rope Radio. Johnny Logan and I will try to get an interview out of the Nigerian Nightmares. I'm still trying to figure out, well, Nigeria has two official languages of English and French with Bantu and a whole bunch of other dialects in the middle. I managed them myself. I'm still trying to figure out their dialects, so I got some digging to do. So on that note, while I upload this thing, I got some homework to do to try to get something out of these cats besides ga. I think they holding out, but I could be wrong. But on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I'm out. Peace.